right, we're back. So what are we talking about today?
Cost of building. The terrifying cost of building.
Money.
Yeah. Money talks.
Yeah, man. Like, I don't know about you guys, but I cannot really cope with it anymore. From a cost perspective, like the amount of times you sit down in initial time, like meeting with a client, and you go, "What's their budget?" And they go, "Oh, I don't really know. How much do you think it's going to cost?" And even though we're at the relative coalface in the profession, I've got no idea. And what it cost yesterday, it won't cost that tomorrow. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. The amount of times I get asked, I get the phone call, if you had to put it into a square meter rate, what would that be?
Anywhere between
so hard. I'm like, what are you?
10,000.
No, anywhere between 1,000 and 10,000. You know, like you got no design. How am I meant to price something that doesn't exist?
Yeah,
it's very hard to
so
price
classic.
That doesn't exist.
I know.
And then when clients go, "Oh, my budget's X," and you go, "Well, we can't deliver what your brief says for that amount of money. We need to compromise." They go, "Oh no, I don't want to compromise." And you go, "Well, you don't have an option."
Yeah, that conversation changes though once estimates do come in.
Yeah.
How do you guys deal with that square meter rate question?
Try and ignore it. But what we've done in the past is if there's a very similar project that we've done, we'll often say, "We've done this similar project, we caveat it with these are the differences and it cost X." But that's not to say that yours will be the same, Yeah. And again, it's that time scale thing. You complete a project 12 months ago versus trying to compete it now. The value is different, Sorry, value is not the right word. The cost is different.
Yeah.
It's moving so quickly.
Oh, dude. Hard. It's just impossible to keep up. And I don't really know what the right answer is. I don't think there is an answer to it.
Well, I've got a different strategy. My strategy, because I get asked it, obviously having a construction company does not help because you're expected to know a little bit more in depth the cost of materials and labor. But I get asked it relatively often, and my strategy is to get concept design done at the very least. I'm just like, okay, cool. I'm happy to maybe put some sort of thumb in the air estimate, but we need to get through concept design to understand at least a little bit about what you're after here.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's just completely
pointless.
Yes, and it's no good for
I reckon there's a slight issue that comes up sometimes when somebody can't afford what they want. It's like, are you willing to draw them a concept that is wildly out of their reach? Like, I've lost clients in the past refusing to draw something that they couldn't afford.
It's interesting, eh? Yeah, because we do it the same way as you, Ben, in that we sort of say to clients, "Hey, look, you don't really know what your budget is. You've given us this indication. Let's develop a concept based on the aspects of your brief, which we think you can achieve, and then we'll get like a QS or somebody to look at it, from concept design." And that way, and we usually do that, and we just sign them up to a small projects agreement up to stage B2. And then once it's priced, then you can start to make some decisions because you've got something a little bit more concrete. I mean, we've never had the opportunity where a client's come to us and been like, "I have no budget. Be free."
Yeah. There's probably two things.
Still have a window.
Yeah.
There's probably two things they're really looking at when they're asking for square meter rates. A is some sort of, can I afford it? And then B, I guess, is am I going to overcapitalize?
Yeah, and that overcapitalization thing's interesting, and that we've got it here in our kind of sort of discussion points that we want to cover today. And Johnny raised an interesting point the other day. He was like, I think New Zealanders have a issue with overcapitalization because so much of our wealth is tied up in property. Like I'd say in general, and this may be wrong, I'd be happy to be corrected, but I know it's the case for myself, is that like I don't have like investments as such. Most of our like, family wealth, my wife and I, is all tied up in property. And I'd say that's the case for a lot of people in New Zealand. And so there's so much value in that overcapitalization is a real issue. But what you lose sight of is that real human nature and that actual like why does the value matter when you could just want to enjoy it, if you know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, it's a tricky one to answer, really. I guess like that's just kind of how New Zealand's set up in a way. All of the governments even want to push people into owning their own house. There's a lot of sort of first homeowner initiatives and that sort of thing. So yeah, we're definitely set up. I don't know if it's about security or if it's less risk, but even like the KiwiSaver system, you can actually withdraw your superannuation if you're going to purchase an asset, right? So it's like it really is how New Zealand is set up in a way.
Yeah, and being able to overcapitalize is a bit of a position of privilege, really. Like if you can afford to do that and have the desire, why not? But like if the sale of your house one day is going to, I don't know, pay for your care home or whatever, like you can kind of understand the reason people are afraid to do these things. But I think there's a misunderstanding of what is overcapitalizing. Like painting your house red instead of grey is probably not overcapitalizing.
Well, that's exactly right, though. I guess like overcapitalizing is probably an easier one to overcome if you know some sort of basic equation to understand what overcapitalizing is. When even just like going through that design process, a lot of the things that we do at the very early stages, run your numbers on a feasibility study, so you do actually know, working backwards from what you're purchasing the property for, what you've got the property for, or what the property you've already got is valued at, and then where you see the future. Is it something that you're looking to sell within a couple of years or straight away, or is it something that you're looking to hold for the long term, and then working backwards? So that's understanding
that long-term thing's the interesting one though, right? Because a lot of the stuff that you do, you're working more with developers, so they're purchasing, they're developing, and then they're moving on. So it's quite a short time frame of ownership.
Yeah.
Or before you realize like a return on your investment. Whereas for a residential client, that return on investment could be 10, 15, 20 longer, years. So the overcapitalization argument's a bit of an odd one because you don't know what the value of something is in 20 years. So if you're looking at the overcapitalization issue, I obviously understand it in relation to lending, but at the same time, like, is it not worth investing in your home, particularly from a renovation point of view, for better comfort, better performance, better quality, whatever, and not kind of worrying about those bottom numbers if you can?
Yeah, that's the crux of it, though. Obviously, the lending is based on the market value of the property. So unless you've got cash in the bank to be able to increase the value of the property, then you're kind of stuck. I guess you have to stick within the parameters.
Yeah,
within your feasibility.
So when you're doing those initial sort of feasibility studies, because you'll probably do this far more rigorously and involved than I do. I don't know about you, Gerard, but like, what are you looking at? Like, what's the sort of things that you're researching and information that you're inputting to come out with whether a project is going to be feasible?
Definitely market research. So we do, just visiting a lot of open homes to understand what you're after and where that is currently sitting in the market. Talk to a lot of real estate agents, and then we do like a feasibility study and a concept design, and we even take that to and have a sit down with real estate agents, which has its pros and cons. I think it's a necessary step to get some sort of appraisal from them to understand where it's sitting within the market. that's how you can tie in the whole feasibility. But the cons are you end up kind of at the real estate agent's mercy a little bit, where you end up not designing how they want you to design, but there's certain things that real estate agents just see every day and they're like, this sells, this sells, this sells. But how often do they actually see an architecturally designed house? Very rarely for sale. So it's so hard because some of the feedback you get is just from what is out there, not what is good design.
This harkens back to the end of our conversation with Matt in the last pod, right? And like, it does. Not to be too rude, but like most people just follow the trend, lovely gold taps, muted tan color palette, and those sort of things. And you're right, like they sell because most people out there are pretty vanilla, and they're like, oh, I've seen that on Instagram or on my Pinterest board, so that's what I like. And then confronted with anything different, they're a bit like, oh, much.
Well, also just going back and answering that question a bit more in depth, we also do extremely rigorous due diligence. So we make sure that whatever we've got sort of under contract does have a due diligence period. And this is slightly different for, someone that's already got property, but you should go through the process all the same. And that involves just even like the slope of the section, where the services are, the orientation, schools, all the zoning, school zones, all of that sort of thing. And ultimately those aspects of the build do add or decrease the cost, the overall cost of construction. Like building on a flat section is always going to be significantly easier and less expensive than building on even like a 5-degree slope by quite a bit. And then, not only that, but there's also this, and this is really like kind of city format, but, transportation is a huge one, making sure that there's, you can get the correct slopes and that sort of thing when you're like entering and exiting a property, turning circles.
Yeah, right.
So there's so many factors that come into play when trying to understand what a construction cost more accurately will look like. Even like, is there a building on there already, an existing building? What are you going to do with it? We basically do a lot of due diligence, and we look at a lot, and just through that process, you get a bit of an understanding of how the cost of construction a little bit more in depth.
Would you go as far as like a geotech report, or do a lot of properties nowadays come with one? Or
yeah, it is a mixed bag. If it's a bigger site, then yes, but a lot of them come with at least a builder's report, so what the state of whatever's on there. It's a risk thing, basically. If you're putting a lot of capital into it, then purchasing a geotech report and getting it surveyed is low risk. Doing that up front than making a mistake and doing it later. So the answer is yes. We would if it's a bigger site.
Yeah, it's a tricky one though, right? Like for your individual sort of like resi client that's doing a one-off house, they're less likely to want to just drop, $3,000 to $5,000 up front for some information, before even seeing an idea. So you're right. It's definitely like a scale thing.
It is, but also way less risk when you're doing like a standalone build. It's really...
Yeah, you say that, but man, like...
Just a lot of people get burnt in the ground, especially in city. Yeah. You find an old rubbish dump under your house or something.
Yeah,
Wellington's the worst, right? Like we've got a site at the moment, and even the geotech initially assumed, pretty good ground when did some testing, and the ground is horseshit. We're not laying back temporary cuts because we can't. They're like 30 degrees and they underpin the house by huge amounts. So they're like, we're going to be like 200K in the ground before you even start building. And that's terrifying for the clients,
Yeah. Do you think there's a correlation between the sort of valleys in Wellington and being full of shit.
Probably these probably all old rubbish dumps.
It happened to be in an old valley, and they just find like massive pile of bricks and roofing iron and shit in there.
Yeah, I also think that there's been a huge amount of unregulated work where, especially like cut and fill, where sites have just pushed shit over a bank, and someone else's problem later down the track, and because there's not a lot of land left in the cities, particularly in Wellington, you're sort of you're encountering all those old rubbish dumps all the time now.
Yeah, well, a huge one recently is obviously the flood zone. So all of these properties that used to be low-ish risk and no one really cared that much, especially in Auckland, no one's going near them now. If you've got anything near a flood zone, you just never get that resale.
And is that
or you're at risk?
Is that that's an insurance thing, right? Like it's not dissimilar to Wellington with its like tsunami zone, flood zones, and obviously earthquake risk. Like insurance companies aren't touching. Christchurch is the same. Yeah, insurance companies aren't touching some of these places.
Yeah, definitely, and just resale value. No one wants to be at risk of flood. The crazy downpours that we've been experiencing, it's just not worth it.
Yeah, it's interesting, because this all ties back to what our root discussion is, which is the cost of building. Because to overcome a lot of these issues is costly. To overcome these flooding issues, you've got to raise your house a certain level. There's extra cost in that. To overcome earthquake issues, you've got to strengthen the hell out of a house. There's cost in that.
Yep.
To overcome all of these things, there's so much associated costs. And Matt in the last pod talked about how nice it would be to return to the days when you could build, 1,500 a square meter or something. Do you think that that's just gone because regulation is it's just killed it now?
Yeah, I would say right now, just because of the high interest rates. So obviously the high interest rates have slowed the economy down, which is intended to do. But so because of that, we're obviously seeing a decrease in labor rates and material prices to a certain extent. But the fact is, material prices are just never going to come back down.
They'll plateau away, but
yeah, and as soon as those interest rates decrease again and work picks up again, the labor rates are going to pick back up again. So there's just nowhere where the material prices will be reduced. Unless there's more competition, why would they? And in fact, what we're seeing because of a lot of our regulatory system, so the council requiring extensive evidence for construction, we're seeing the smart companies. I say smart because it's good for the company, but not good for the purchaser. A lot of supplier ring fencing, which always frustrates the hell out of me. So that's basically when you purchase a product. So let's say, for example, you're purchasing a cladding, but that cladding is a part of a system, and that system has to be purchased from the same supplier of the cladding. So then all of a sudden you've got, your cladding, then all of your flashings and your fixings that have to come from the same supplier. They put a premium on it because their product, likely because it's a good product, but also competition is just not there. And so all of a sudden, your costs for material just through the roof because you've reduced competition by just saying that if you want this product, you have to buy these accessories, as opposed to being able to swap for similar flashing systems or similar fixings. I want to say, though, I do understand that it is also an element of risk reduction. It's those proprietary systems have been tested and likely code marked or brands appraised. So I understand that, but also the ring fencing is very expensive.
It'd be interesting to see if that regulatory change around the testing of building products and systems that's slated to come in I think December this year, has any impact on that. So it's sort of brands and code mark isn't necessarily going to be gospel anymore. They're also going to accept other comparable overseas testing methods. I wonder if that will introduce like a better competition and just more supply to the market, or are we such a small fish at the bottom of the world that it's not really going to have any impact? I don't know. What do you reckon?
Well, we're definitely a small fish and we're an island, which never helps. However, more competition will always be beneficial.
Yeah. It's just
Did
whether
we get
anybody...
an example of that with the plasterboard over COVID timeframe? Because we started to bring in some international competition.
Yeah.
Did anybody notice a drop in any of those prices?
Yes, there was maybe not a drop, but the premium was reduced, I guess. So then more likely that the product was just down to where it should have been in the first place. But that's slightly different, like those supply chain disruptions. Another issue, because, you're an island nation, you have those supply chain disruptions, but they can be extremely expensive. We're not experiencing any of that at the moment. I think it's kind of come right. But if something like COVID ever happens again or something similar, we'll definitely see that again. And those, once again, the material prices will skyrocket due to supply and demand.
Are some of those plasterboard suppliers still around?
Yeah, I think elephant board's still available, isn't it?
Well, elephant board's kind of always been available, but what were the other ones that?
Well, I believe that was just the government bringing in container loads in bulk. I'm not sure if they're still doing that or not. I don't think so.
Yeah, because that's what I'd find interesting, if those products manage to find a foothold and survive.
Just some sort of market. Yeah.
But if they're not surviving, then are we just too small, or
just high barriers to entry?
Loyal?
It's so hard over here just to enter the market.
Yeah, and I think even from our point of view, from an architect and specifier point of view, we've used a certain system or a certain way of detailing or whatever for so long, and although a product may be no different, for us to move away from it and try and learn something new, we were kind of reluctant to do so unless really pushed from maybe from a budget point of view or a necessity point of view, like the situation during COVID.
Our laziness to be the reason for costs staying super high.
Yeah, I kind of think we are a bit to blame, as a profession, because people do just turn back to the same thing every time,
But during COVID, they gave those plasterboard ones. They just gave you all the bracing requirements that you need, all the documentation, the product reps.
So they can do it
right in there. I don't reckon that was too much of an issue.
Yeah, because all the bracing units that you're
system,
all those bracing units you're specifying are jib bracing units, and jib is the product. So you do need something similar.
They've been tested.
Yeah.
It was a super easy example of something that could just be substituted in.
Yeah, one market trend
substituted in to a large degree.
One market trend that we're starting to see now, and I don't know if this will come into fruition or not, but I think something like sustainability conscious materials could have a barrier, could have an entry point at some point. You're seeing a lot of fully recycled products. So as soon as they start to become a little bit more feasible, I think potentially they could start to have legs and assist with the costs in some way.
Problem with them though as well is I think you do, and this has been our experience in the type of work that we do, you do pay a premium for quote unquote green materials,
Yeah.
And that's still I think that will change again with the embodied carbon calculation stuff that's coming in, because it's just going to become a necessity, and there's going to be a lot of products that will just struggle to achieve the requirements, and so will slowly phase away, and these green materials will start to take a bit more prominence. But I still think you pay a premium for anything outside of the norm, right? And that's just what you're kind of faced with.
Yeah, well, it's the supply and demand. So they need to be manufacturing in bulk for some sort of price reduction at some point. So it comes down to what people are specifying. So just to your point, if people need to start, if it's required to specify, then you'd like to think that the price is reduced in time.
I see a bit of a risk with that, of like continuing this, ultimately, like the separation between rich and poor. Like if all of a sudden everyone has to buy a more expensive green product, then it's like the lower market that's just trying to get an enclosure to live in. So it's slowly getting further and further out of reach. Like,
yeah, it needs governmental support if that's what they really want to push, right?
Yeah, like you don't want to like ruin a good chunk of your population just for some carbon credits. I think we want to save the world, but we want to save people as well.
Another option could be kind of like when Elon brought out the Teslas. You start off with the premium model, and then you slowly go down to the mid-tier model and then the low-tier model. But there's no reason, there's no reason why you can't tier that sort of thing. But you're absolutely right, Gerard. If it's not accessible, at the end of the day, Jib is an accessible product. So you have to be, and I'm not saying it's a Jib competitor, but you have to be competitive if you want to make any dent in the construction industry in New Zealand. There's only 5 million people in this country, so the market is really not that big, unfortunately.
I wonder how much of the cost conversation as well stems back to, we sort of touched on our laziness as architects sometimes to specify anything that we're unfamiliar with. Although I'd say that we, in general, are more open to changing our mindset than other parts of the industry. For instance, builders, the amount of times that you've specified something and a builder's gone, oh, why did you specify that? That's different. I don't know how to do that, blah, 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 blah. When all it takes is just a little bit of like time to study. And so you're sort of, I feel like everything, both in council's the same, right? Council see something slightly out of the norm or something that they're not used to seeing through a compliance pathway, building consent wise, and they throw their arms up. So the entire sort of industry at the moment is set up to funnel you into this like one channel. And anytime you try and like break out of it, you're just sort of faced with either additional time or additional headaches or additional cost. I don't know. There needs to be, I don't know how it works, but it sort of has to be this like overarching industry-wide just like opening up.
I 100% agree. I've actually found that quite funny. I've noticed it recently, and I'm allowed to say this because I technically am a builder myself, but builders kind of just want to adhere to 3604, but at the same time, they want to build cool stuff. So any cool stuff that you're building, or majority of it, it's going to have some sort of alternative details. But they don't want to do those details. They want to do the 3604 details, but they want the architectural outcome. It's such a funny dynamic.
Why is that? Because I feel like you've got, there's some builders that are really good and they're passionate about building and they're passionate about like, the quality of their work and that making a difference and like contributing to the built environment. And then we have some that you deal with that, come in every day, punch the time clock, punch out, do that, do their house. I guess it's kind of the same in any industry. You're always going to get the people that just like to run the mill. But why is it that they're less open to change? Is it because it takes longer? Is it because they don't care? Like, what is, from your perspective, from the builder's perspective, like what is that influencing factor?
I think there's a combination of you've done it so many times, so you know what it should look like.
Yeah.
You think that there's an easier way to do it, and I'm not going to lie, oftentimes there is. That's just a matter of like getting the builder on at an early stage and getting buy-in from them and getting them to assist with those details, so they can't complain when the details come around and they have to build them. They can't complain anymore. But I think it's just, you've seen it so many times. You see what the council are after. You know that you're the one that has to actually do that added complexity.
So
and make sure it all works. It's complexity. No one wants to. It's always about achieving the best outcome in the easiest possible way.
Is it fair? And this is where the council comes into it as well. Is it fear of liability? Is it fear of doing something different and doing it wrong because you haven't done it 1,000 times before, and then being held culpable for it? Because I feel like this whole argument, the leaky home thing, like obviously it was a problem, but we kind of just got to grow up a little bit. Like so many of us, we have liability insurance, and obviously we're not going to go out there and do negligent work, but it's kind of there to help us like push the barriers of the norm. If we all just did the same shit, everything would be so boring and generic. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, I think it's a lot of it's probably down to personality as well. Like a builder who wants a challenge is probably going to look for more challenging jobs, and somebody who's all they've ever known as spec homes will probably, and they're happy smashing that out. They know what they're doing. They can do it fast and well. Then maybe they just like to stick to that. Like I personally like going after things that are a bit out there or maybe haven't been done before. So I kind of actively seek that out, and I don't see any reason why it wouldn't be the same with builders.
I think we all do as architects though, right? And I think that's kind of the frustrating thing that I find as well. And is that even though we could design something that's incredibly simple and uses pretty standard methodology, as soon as it's like comes from an architect, I feel like it instantly gets architect tax. You know what I mean? A builder, because one, you're unlikely to engage with a builder who, like you said, does this sort of spec house, plug in, plug out type stuff. So they're probably going to be charging slightly more. And also I think it just comes with an architect did it, what's clearly going to be complex, But sometimes it's not, but you're still up against it from a financial point of view because people just make that assumption.
Yeah, I think just going back to your previous question, more of it is probably around finances as opposed to liability. Liability definitely plays a part, but put yourself in the builder's position, right? This architect's given you these extensive plans and you've got a limited time to read through them and put a number to it, right? And you got to try and break it down as much as possible, get your head around all those details, understand what materials involved, and understand what labor is involved. No one can estimate labor accurately. It's impossible. It's absolutely impossible. So then you find yourself, okay, you're awarded the job and you're on site and you're getting to, these complex details, and maybe it just doesn't need to be as complex as it is, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, this is super frustrating. Like if you just did this, it'd be the same outcome, or it's just additional labor or additional time required, just puts a little bit of added stress on the whole job. You got to remember, sometimes when those details go well, you don't hear about them. It's because it's not an issue.
Yeah,
you only ever hear about the ones that are an issue because something has happened, whether it's a material or a labor or a complexity shortfall.
But you're talking about fixed price contracts here, Ben. And I've had this conversation with Ben Nansett from MPB Builders, who we share an office with a lot. And I said to him, I'm like, Ben, you stressed all the time with fixed price contracts. One, it's stressful pricing. Two, it's stressful, like you said, trying to stay within the parameters of your fixed price contract, particularly if things, end up a little bit different. There's got to be, there's definitely something to be said for cost plus or open book contracts and just de-stressing the entire process. And we sort of had that. We recently did a build down south and we had that system in place. And, there was still a budget, but having everything open, you became so much more aware of where your wins and losses were, and you're able to sort of massage the project throughout it. And I think financially it's a better way of doing it. Difficulty is, if you're lending to build, banks don't want to hear about it.
Yeah, I just want to point out, though, that the mentality that you need to go into an open book contract should be that of a fixed price contract. Otherwise, if you go in with an open book contract of like, okay, cool, I can just take my time and get it right, that is probably half the reason why you get extensive cost overruns on the construction side of things.
You're talking about the builder's point of view, right?
From the builder's point of view, well, that at the end of the day, that's the cost of the build. Like the architecture fees more or less are fixed.
But if we're administering, if we as architects are administering that contract, it's our responsibility to, to stay on top of that. Let's call it overrun.
Yes and no. It's also the builder's responsibility because it's their reputation at stake. If they have said they're going to do, they've provided you with an estimate, they want to adhere to it to the best of their abilities. So you still do get that's labour financial stress, although you'll get paid for it. No one wants a fist fight at the end of a job, you know what I mean?
I think the open book, though, charge up kind of thing places huge trust on the builder's performance. Like as soon as they are a bit slow or take a bit too long to do things, then that bill ticks up really quickly.
Yeah, but that's the point. That's why it's still stressful.
Risk on clients, whilst fixed price puts a lot of pressure on the builder to cost it in the first place. I don't know. If you asked me 5 years ago, I would have been on that bandwagon, but I think
on the fixed price or the open book.
That I would have said that fixed price kind of makes builders put in a larger price because of unknowns and risk.
Correct.
And depending on what contract they're using, they might account for retentions or something in their price. But then if you go fixed price, charge up, in the ideal world, it's extremely fair and people get paid for what they do. But that doesn't bring the same level of work ethic, I think, that you get with fixed price. Because when you have fixed price, you actively are chasing the clock, as the builder. Because I do a lot of my sculpture sort of things as fixed price. Well, all of them.
Yeah.
So then I'm all right, I've got to do this for this much. This is going to be my hourly rate if I get it done this time. And then it, massively dwindles if you take too long, which often I do.
Totally.
Whereas do you understand? Fixed price, I think, is better for a client. It adds more certainty to their budget.
I think you're right.
It just means that the builder has to price it properly, and maybe that means the tender period should be longer. If you're tendering or whatever, how long you give them to price something.
Yeah, I agree, but I also am finding that with fixed price contracts, the cost is some of the costs that are put up are astronomical because there are builders are building in so much unknown and so much risk. And maybe you're right, Gerard. Maybe it is because the tender period is too short. I mean, we average 4 to 6 weeks for a tender period, and a lot of the time you can't get anything out of a subcontractor for 8 weeks. So they just put in a provisional sum, and that's laced with high margin and uncertainty.
Yeah, I think it depends on the economy as well. While COVID was booming and builders were everywhere, nobody wanted to tender a thing because they
they were busy,
name their price, and so there's a lot of factors at play, but you just want to be careful with full open book because you got to police it pretty hard. And full open book, I think it should be you want to see everything.
Yeah, just adding to your point, Sam, it's hard to price without adding extra allowance in to something that you've never built before. It's not like you can just put an accurate labor price to something that you've never done before. It's just impossible. How can you do it? So that's why, if you're building complexity, you have to make allowances. Yes, those allowances probably should be a bit more refined, but have you noticed, because you've done a couple of, let's say, SIP houses now, have you noticed, was the first one expensive and then the second one more in line with what your expectations?
No, we haven't had the opportunity to use the same builder a second time round yet. Although, in saying that, like the build that we're doing in Queenstown with Compound, I know that from a labour point of view, because I've built 2 SIP houses side by side, it's the same contract. So I guess it's 2 houses but 1 contract. So we haven't necessarily been able to see the like monetary value, but the labour and the speed of construction for the second one versus the first one was like markedly different.
And I bet if you get them to do a third one again, you'll see those not savings, but it should be priced accordingly.
You'd hope so. Yeah, exactly. And I think that comes back down to the whole economies of scale thing, right? The more often, and this is where we're coming at it with that citrus concept, ideally the more often you do something, the cheaper it gets. The first ones will be expensive, but, as the experience grows across the board, those prices start to drop. Problem being is that, like you said, you build in complexity. But my argument to that, and I have this argument with builders quite often, is they're like, oh, you've designed this super complex thing. And I'm like, no, it's not complex. It's exactly the same as this detail or whatever is exactly the same as like the last project that you did. You're just looking at it in a different context, but it is the same.
So then is that not up to the architect to provide the correct, I guess, display their details or their drawings in a way that they understand it? I don't know. Is it a detailing thing? I guess is my question.
It could be a detailing thing, and I guess particularly if you're not working with the same builder time and time again, they're regularly getting different detailing sets and like laid out differently, different appearance every time. And so it feels like you're trying to reinvent the wheel with every project, but it's not necessarily the case. I think as well. Oh no, I've lost my train of thought.
Do you guys go through your drawing set? This is just a curiosity question. Do you guys go through your drawing set once it's kind of finished and be like, if I was a builder, would I understand this? Does it have all of the information I require on it? Is everything been annotated correctly? Has everything got the correct dimensions on it? Is it easy to understand page to page? Like you're not going from the first page to the middle page to, is the layout formatted correctly? Because, like all of those things help significantly.
Do you reckon that helps reduce cost in building?
I think it helps reduce cost because it makes the build run a little bit smoother.
Okay. Interesting. I mean,
hopefully would help pricing if you knew.
And pricing.
What you were.
Yeah, I guess, no, we don't, but we do ask for feedback from builders and tenderers on like our drawing set after a project, or like, was it easy to understand? But I guess, sorry, I lost my train of thought. I picked it back up again. Sorry. I'm back with myself. What we're talking about, and I think a lot of the issues that we're sort of discussing certainly stem around tendered projects, particularly, or projects where a contract is engaged late in the piece, be that post-building consent or be that like midway through detail design or something. I think there's certainly a lot of value, although you lose that opportunity for competition, but there's so much value in an early contractor involvement engagement because you have the builder along with you. So you're developing the design with them in tow. So you're kind of working through all of those intricacies, those details. You're looking for those cost savings through the process. And that's what we try and engage with as much as possible. But what's difficult from a client's perspective is, like I just mentioned, is that competition thing. You're sort of tying yourself into somebody initially on the recommendation of either us or a friend or what have you. I don't know. What are your guys' thoughts on that ECI process? Because we think it's a great method, but we just don't get the opportunity to sort of utilize it as much as we'd like.
I think it's good in theory. I've just had the comment in the past about like, oh, we've got to recuperate our costs from that time period.
From the builder.
Yeah. So from that early involvement process, then they're factoring that time into the price as well.
And why shouldn't they? It's not like you're getting paid for it.
But like, you're not guaranteed that they're going to be that competitive, and then they're giving you a lot of feedback, which ultimately quite often is super helpful. But like, you're not guaranteed that
Yeah.
you're going to post bang for your buck ultimately.
It's that trust thing again, though, right? And
huge trust.
It comes back to ideally utilizing contractors or even consultants. It's the same argument: utilizing people you've worked with before and building that relationship thing, and therefore ideally that will reduce cost because you're not trying to re-engage with somebody new every time. But I think like in terms of recuperating costs, I think they're totally within their right to. But I also feel like if the contract goes ahead, there should be some sort of level of it was built, it's built in.
Yeah, agreed. I mean, I've only really done that throughout my whole career. There was makers and makers fabrication, so we did numerous tenders, but ultimately makers fabrication was always the more competitive. And makers fab generally had early contractor involvement, and that was probably the reason why it was more competitive, because when you understand the complexities from the get-go.
Was that with internally? Was that like with makers architecture and makers fab, or are you just talking about as a contractor in general?
No, makers architecture, makers fab, and even now with bare architecture and bare construction, it's just keeping it internal is always our preference, because the transfer of information from the architect to the construction side, it's
Are you then blurring into design build?
But it's not like we weren't tendering at all.
I guess this kind of peels us all the way back to, this sort of discussion it's important for architects and builders to listen to this and kind of, think internally about their systems and the way to reduce building, because the cost of building is out of control. But from a client perspective, what can they take away from this? Like, what are the mechanisms for, trying to avoid cost overrun? What are the mechanisms for, trying to get value in your project or anything like that? What have you guys got off the top of your head that they could take away?
I think a thorough set of documents helps every time, because quite often in the past we've tried to save money by, save design fees, assuming that then that would roll over into save building, you get extra 10 grand or whatever to spend on your building. But so often, the more thorough your documentation, the more accurate your pricing is going to be. If you're going down that route of a tendered project, or even if you're going fixed, then you've got more accurate information to price on. So I think just being as thorough as extremely possible.
Yeah, up front.
Which, if you asked me 5-10 years ago, I would have had the opposite opinion.
No, I agree. I think having a rigorous process within the architectural realm at the design stage, man, it has such an immense flow-on effect through the construction phase.
It's interesting, though.
It is. I've got to say, though, it's pretty hard to put a dollar value to those savings.
Do you? Yeah, well, that's the thing, right? And do you find, this is an issue that I find, is when you're setting fees, clients aren't looking that far ahead. So they see your fees and they go, oh, they're high. And you go, well, they're high because, we want to be able to, like you said, Gerard, produce a really thorough documentation set. And we load that stage B5 pretty heavily, that detailed documentation stage pretty heavily, because we want to do that within our studio. But, an extra sort of 5 grand or 10 grand or whatever in architect's fees at that stage could save you 20 to 30 to 40 more in a build stage, but clients they don't really make that correlation. How do you best, I don't know, I guess what I'm trying to say is, how do you best communicate that and justify your fees?
Yeah. It's not easy.
I think that's because most people are coming from a background where they're it's down to that percentage value again of 5% of houses that are architecture or done by an architect, or probably less of houses.
Yeah.
So if all your friends' experience of getting a house built or something is their plans cost 5 grand because it's off the set,
Yeah.
But if you want architecture and you want an element of bespoke, an element of design in there, you unfortunately have to pay for that. And I would then be slightly worried if your architecture fees were too cheap, because then you're going to run into some issues on site.
And that's often where that like project overrun comes into it, I think, is poor quality documentation, lack of like understanding, lack of information, lack of surety. Moving into the start, you might get through consent, but if you're starting construction and there's not like a complete project overview and understanding, it's so risky from a cost overrun point of view.
Yeah, just the unknowns are way higher. So that's the RFIs and extra money you're going to have to pay on site. This is in the ideal world, There's still chances you find things you don't know that were there underground.
Yeah.
It's generally jobs are more relaxing when they're out of the ground.
Yeah. It's hard to... I think the ideal contract is more or less what we're doing is... It's hard to do a fixed price on anything to do with the soil at any point in time, really. Anything earth-related. You just don't know. It's impossible. You don't know what's under there, so...
Yeah, well, me and Gerard were talking about that before you jumped on, Ben. I got a raft of RFIs today that were just 17 RFIs and 15 of the responses were, read the drawings, you twat. But
right there in the middle of the page.
Yeah, and we don't charge hourly for RFIs, but maybe we, everyone I talk to are like, why? And I know we felt funny about it for a while, but maybe we need to, because you're just wasting your time responding to stupid queries like that.
We do. I would happily even just lower my rate slightly if they had an issue with it.
Yeah,
but I would never not do hourly rate for RFIs. Yeah,
good lesson. Take that on board.
Yeah, it's a big unknown, the old council.
Yeah.
Whatever the flavour of the month is that they've been told to look at.
That has to be a podcast in itself, though, surely. I've been thinking about this a lot, and I'm like, how do we do that podcast without just absolutely annihilating the council? Maybe we just need to get like a council worker of some description on hand and have a proper conversation.
Oh, it'd be so hard not to just kind of fly off the handle though, eh?
Yeah. No.
You guys think tendering's coming back?
Yeah, I asked the builder the other day, would you tender this project? And he was like, yep.
Yeah, it's
the first
quiet
time I've ever heard him say that.
It's still quiet. So builders need work. The demand is there for sure.
So you kind of hope that a bit of, because there's competition, there'll be a little bit more cost reduction.
Yeah. And don't be afraid to ask, can you go any lower on this? Where are the savings? We have that. We literally would have that conversation every single day with either a contractor or a subcontractor. I don't think it's not like we're trying to like shaft anyone. It's just trying to understand where the costs are.
It's a good point,
and where the savings can be made, and how are you going to know without asking?
It's a good point, actually, because I think even with our fees to a degree as well, there is a little bit of a barter I feel like there should be a little bit of a barter process, like architects' fees as well as build costs, because everyone's just going to like put their best foot forward, right? And I think so often everyone either blindly accepts it or they don't question it, or even just have like an open discussion about it. You know what I mean? And I think that there should be a bit more of that, both with building, like you said, Ben. I think that's a great idea. I mean, you so often just accept it for gospel. But I also think with our fees as well, like, sometimes you put a fee offer out there and you just never ever hear back from somebody, and you might, chase them up a month or two later and they're like, oh, you were too expensive. I'm like, well, we could have talked about things,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That
always
madness.
Happens, eh? You're like,
yeah,
even write that in there, like, oh, please feel free to discuss.
I do. And, and they're just like, but your fees said this. And I'm like, yeah, but like, let's talk about it. We need work as well.
Something you have to let go. What do you guys think about predictions moving forward? Is the world looking better?
It's definitely looking. The interest rates will be coming down soon. Well, that's just obviously my opinion, but I would say within the end of the year it'll be a bit of a decent reduction.
I think
so that means that hopefully building will pick back up a little bit as people start borrowing money, purchasing property again.
Yeah, you'd hope so, but I think there's always going to be, a decade or however longer, working in this profession, there's always going to be something, right? Interest rates might drop, but then a new legislation will come in.
Yeah,
something will happen, and then like a factory will burn down, and you can't buy any Jeep anymore or something. There's always there's always something that's impacting our industry, and personally, I think it's just on it's just like a steady inclination.
Well, holistically, it is.
Obviously,
but within this cycle where we are currently, it's definitely slower.
That era of building I hate this term, but an architecturally designed home, the era of building that for 4,500 a square meter is pretty well done.
Well, that's a standalone, right? What you're talking about?
Yeah. Sorry, standalone. Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's my thoughts.
Ooh, square meter rates. How ballsy of you to start dropping some square meter rates.
All right.
But what if they want to buy it? What if it's only a small... No, I'm just kidding.
Small means way higher square meter.
Yeah. What if it's massive then? What if it's massive? But if someone came to you with a brief of 4,500 square meters, would you do it? We
tried really, really, really hard. The restricted section, that project, that SIP house in Newtown, clients came to us with a brief. They said we don't want to spend more than 4,200 a square meter, and we did everything we could on that project to get the cost of that building down. I reckon it's an awesome building, but it's a shell. There's very little ornamentation to that thing at all.
Yeah.
And we did that for 4,800.
That's a man who's clearly run his numbers to be that specific, though. So I respect that.
Yeah.
There was that old Frank Lloyd Wright when he got asked to do that $5,000 house or something. Some guy asked him to do an affordable house, and I think he said he was surprised that nobody had asked him before, so he took it up. And in that one, he lost money on the job so he could reach the target.
Just took no fees.
That doesn't count. Surely that doesn't count.
Buy the odd 4x2 or something. Yeah.
Isn't that like you doing all the landscaping at your mum's place, Gerard?
Oh yeah. Oh no, at the hospital we did.
Yeah. The hospital, exactly.
It's a commercial job, and I'm out there in the rain for a week on my hands and knees.
We're suckers for punishment, old architects, eh?
It's all for the end product.
I love a garden. The garden pops off a building,
yeah.
It really puts that finishing touch. If I had to drive past and not see a garden,
I'd kill you, eh?
Garden.
Yeah.
I think architects, though, maybe sometimes we can't be bothered finding what other plasterboard there are out there, but I think we're ever reinventing the wheel to try and make things cheaper.
I agree.
We're definitely big picture thinkers and always scratching the noggin to try and find something cheaper.
I know people like to think that architects are out here just making shit expensive, but I think it's the opposite, really. We work really hard to keep costs down and stay within budget, and a lot of the time it's just out of our hands because stuff costs what it costs,
Can you build, I'm not sure, can you build like a spec home, a one-off spec home for $4,500 a square meter these days?
Yeah, apparently. I know people have recently told me that they can, like this. So the citrus thing, right? I passed that around developers because I thought it could suit them, and we sort of were talking about build rates, and I told them what we'd built comparable ones for, and they're like, oh no, I'm not interested, we can build houses for 2,500 a square meter. And I really wanted to say to them, how, where, and show me, because if I went in there and huffed and puffed, I reckon I could blow that thing down.
Yeah, purchasing power. I wouldn't underestimate purchasing power.
Even so, though, you've still got labor, right? And even if your chippies labor is not too bad, subbies kill you. We haven't even touched on subtrades in this pod. Maybe that's a whole nother discussion.
You just need to, once again, have that conversation with the subcontractors. See, the way we do it is different to how you guys do it. We give the subbies our number and be like, can you do it for this? Which is obviously something you can't do when the economy's up and everyone's got a lot of work on. But especially right now, you can 100% do that. Like, this is our value. This is our figure for this.
And how do you come to that, though? How do you come to that, though, Ben? That figure?
Well, experience, data, just previous work. Because when you've done more or less the same thing over and over again, different architecturally, but the plumbing side of a 3-bedroom house with a kitchen and blah 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 really doesn't vary that much. So,
but then again, like, I've had this discussion recently where I've said, we're building this quite simple structure. I cannot see it costing more than, I think I worked out, it had quite a bit of earthworks associated with it. I worked out it to be about 7,000 a square meter, and the builder was like, "Nah, you can't build that. Not a chance."
Yeah,
you're like, what the hell?
But once again, it's a negotiation. Just having that conversation about price, as opposed to just receiving a
accepting
quote
it as
and
gospel,
accepting it.
So, what's the takeaways, guys? Challenge prices.
At the moment, definitely.
Thorough documentation.
Yeah, that's key.
Advocate for your fees.
Work hard on specification. Don't be lazy.
Yeah, work hard on specification. Specify the right products.
Yeah, and I don't know, try not to be too complex.
Just get an accountant, steel and tube.
I guess they ultimately just get clients that have more money and not have to worry about any of this.
The dream.
I mean, that's what 99% of architecture firms out there aim to achieve, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, maybe. I mean, I like that our target, that we're trying to provide architecture for everybody, and that our target audience is not just your high flyers. I think that architecture should be accessible to everyone and not just, the top 1 or 5%, whatever.
Yeah.
So there's got to be a way to still produce good architecture and make it affordable.
I know this pod is coming to an end, but one thing that we definitely should have covered, because it's probably quite key in terms of cost, is the architect being the builder, or either being the developer or having some sort of joint venture scenario where they've got skin in the game.
You reckon that helps reduce cost because you've got more care?
I think just care and control is huge. And I always wonder how much just not knowing about money impacts the actual build cost. So how often, unless you're like let's say an architect who's built their own house, they probably know something about build costs. But unless you're the one that directly has to pay those bills and procure that material, understanding the cost kind of goes a little bit over your head. I don't know. Is that a fair thing to say, or am I being a bit...
Well, I was going to say that I recently built my own house and managed the contract and procured a lot of material and have a very clear understanding of how much things cost. And now, almost 9 months on, I'm back in the dark because the shit just changes so quickly.
Yeah, that's fair. Okay.
Yeah. Just going through that process of being so aware is, I think, important. Like, doing mum's place it hits home a lot harder than other people.
Yeah.
Sometimes you can, in a healthy way, disassociate a little bit from the full implications.
Totally. But when it's your money or a close friend or family person's money, it kind of, it resonates a little bit harder.
I think so.
Really, can hit home, which is good. I think it makes us a little bit wiser in a small way.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I guess
All right. Happy days.
that's the pod.
Nice. Good chat, lads.
All right.
Happy days.
Cheers for tuning in. We'll see you all on the next one.
Peace. See ya.